Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 168 of the podcast. In this episode, I talk with Yancy all about kids worship. And we kind of dive deep into different age groups about what that looks like to lead worship for preschoolers or elementary kids or preteens. And Yancy, of course, is one of the best in the business, creating great music for preschool, elementary kids, preteens, all of that. But we talk about leading kids. What does that look like? How do volunteers get involved? What's it look like from stage with motions and different music style choices and all of that, which is if you lead kids ministry in any way, then this is something you have dealt with. So I enjoyed my conversation with Yancy, and I think you will as well. As usual, you can get the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 168. But let's go ahead now and jump into my conversation with Yancy about kids worship. Well, today we have Yancy on the podcast. Welcome, Yancy.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
So as we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry and like what's going on these days.
Yeah, so I get the privilege of writing songs and recording songs and making videos to help lead kids in worship. And I do that a couple different ways. I have a series for younger kids called Little Praise Party. Those songs are more action-oriented and real fun and engaging. I've got another series of worship resources I do geared more for preteen and elementary, and that's called Kidmin Worship. And then I also get to travel around the country and do family concerts and different events, partnering with churches and camps and VBS events and whatnot. So it's a lot of fun. And right now I'm working on some new Little Praise Party music and new Christmas songs. And so I have a lot of new good stuff lined up to be coming out in the next 6 months, really.
Awesome. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some other new stuff you have. But the thing I want to talk a lot about is because I'm thinking we've rarely talked about this actually on the podcast. This is something we haven't talked about a lot, is leading worship for kids and what that can look like in different age groups and how can volunteers be a part of that and staff. I mean, it's one of those things that's just awesome to do it well, but sometimes it can seem hard, as a leader. So I'd love to just get your expertise on what that looks like. So let's start with the youngest kids, with preschoolers. Some leaders listening may not even do some type of organized, singing worship time with preschoolers. But what do you think an ideal worship time looks like for preschoolers?
Yeah. Well, and let me just say this too, starting off, I think it's so important and great for ministry directors and children's ministry leaders to really think about worship for every age group, depending on your breakdown of classrooms and age groups, how that works within your ministry, to really think about it, starting like so many other topics with the end in mind. Like, where do I want these kids to end up, when they're 18 years old, when they graduate from children's ministry, go into youth ministry? Like, what are the qualities and what are the experiences that I want them to have engaged with and understand and be able to really, plug in and apply in their life in regards to worship. And so one of the things that I think is important too is just to define both for yourself in leadership, but also for your volunteers and the other teachers that are helping you with this, define what the goal of worship is, in preschool ministry. Maybe you get even more specific in what does that look like for the 2s and 3s versus what does that look like for our kindergartners. And to really just think about it as it's a set of stairs, and so where you're starting in preschool, you're going to build upon that for early elementary, you're going to build upon that for preteen, and keep moving forward. So, in a perfect world too, that's sitting down with other areas of leadership and, getting a student ministry pastor and even your adult worship pastor together and just saying, hey, what do we want adult worshipers in our church to be like? And then take all the necessary steps to help accomplish that in the life of a child. But so starting with preschool, I think, it's just all in all, it's important to make time to do worship every single week. And there are scriptures that tell us that there is power in our kids' worship. And so I look at it as the power of God can be unleashed and ignited in your classrooms every single week simply by you being intentional in this area and choosing to do certain songs and lead your kids well. And so one of my favorites is Psalm 8, 1 and 2. Message translation, it says, God, brilliant Lord, yours is a household name. Nursing infants gurgle choruses about you, and toddlers shout the songs that drown out atheist babble. And I remember the day that I was like reading that verse, in my office. At the time, I was working on what is the first little praise party album. And I realized, preschoolers are challenging. There's times that they're snot blowing out of their nose and they're throwing a tantrum over something that is not important whatsoever. We have those moments that's challenging, but I realized that same kid taking a few moments out of their day to sing God is so good, or to sing the chorus of how great is our God, and just to celebrate, who God is, can make even those people in our lives that don't have a relationship with God, that maybe have walked away from the church. The list can go on, to realize that the power of those youngest kids in our ministry worshiping God can help people to stop and realize how true the gospel actually is and what that can mean in their life. And so that was an eye-opening thing for me, was coming across that verse and just realizing the power that is at work in our classroom. So the thing is, everybody has a different amount of time. So it's hard for me to say, the ideal worship experience is to do X amount of songs, because some people are working with half an hour, and some people are working with 45 minutes or 60 minutes, or some people have an hour and a half. And so what you can do within those spans of time are completely different. So I'm not going to give you a set in stone, do X amount of songs per week, and that's going to get you the golden ticket, that you need. But I will say, make time for it. And the best thing to keep in mind related to preschool is, remember, attention spans. It's just like so many other parts of your service and your class that you're doing with them, is to just realize you have those shorter attention spans. The vocabulary in the songs is really, really important. The songs not being super complicated, is important. Having a lot of repetition with the songs, not having simpler forms of songs. So sometimes that means that songs that really only have like 2 sections, or it may be a song like God is so good that is just very, very repetitive, and the same thing kind of happens over and over, maybe just switching out a lyric. So the length of song is important. I like to say, whenever possible, songs that are only 2 minutes to 3 minutes tops. I will just give everyone this reminder too. So in music, there's something called a BPM, which is beats per minute. Faster songs have a higher BPM. Slower songs have a slower BPM. And so that's why generally you will find a slower song is a longer song, because the beat moves slower. Therefore, it takes longer to accomplish all those different parts of the song. So although I say you want your songs to definitely only be 2 to 3 minutes, just know if you're doing a worship song, it's going to at least be 3 minutes. Even an example is Father Abraham. That song is very repetitive, but by the time you do both arms, both legs, spin around, nod your head, etc., the repetition also makes the time on the clock add up to be a bigger sum of time. So just keep that in mind as you're considering songs too, that those are some exceptions to the rule related to the length of song. But, it may work best for you to break up all of the songs, in preschool, and do one song here and then do a different segment and do a lesson and do a song and, do a craft and do another song. With preschool, it's great for getting the wiggles out. But even that being said, as a worship leader, I do love having a couple songs back to back. And even in the context of preschool ministry, that can work when you just plan it well. So I might go from a really active and super engaging song where everyone's going to be even a little bit tired, after having done that song, because of how much movement is required. And I have found too that then at the end of that song, telling everybody, okay, let's sit down. We're going to get really still, a little bit quiet, share with them. I like to say with preschoolers, it's that we sing to Jesus because it's a way we can show him we love him. Preschool kids, they love their mom, they love their grandma, they love their favorite toy. They get the concept of love, even at the earliest age. And so just teaching them about worship, that we do this because it's a way we show Jesus we love him. And inviting them to sit down, kind of calm down. They're tired, so they do a better job of sitting in that moment. And I found then that's the point. Then I can lead them in that slower worship song and kind of focus their attention a little bit to even sing that slower song. I know sometimes in ministry, people will say, I don't do slow songs because my kids don't know how to respond to them. Which when they say that to me, I always want to rewind the tape recorder and play back what they just said. Because it's like, how are they ever going to learn if you've taken away the opportunity for them to engage and learn how to respond and behave and act during that time? So that being said, even with preschoolers, a slow worship song can work. You just got to be strategic of where you place it and let those dynamics work for you.
Cool. How about some churches might have, like, especially older preschool, right? Like a larger preschool worship time, where they're getting them all together, maybe watch the video together. And then other younger or even in different church settings, there's by room. And so they're, each room is figuring out how to do that on their own. Any thoughts or tips about that? I mean, it seems to me like it's not necessarily right and wrong as much as, however you want to do it well in both the settings.
Yeah. Exactly. I don't think it's a one size, fits all method. Everybody has to do different things differently for what works for them and their team. And, in many cases, you've got a teacher that's just pushing play on a song and making that happen. I think the important, and something I've often said too, is leading worship is more about your leadership ability than your musical ability. And so I share that with people because I want to empower you guys as kids ministry leaders and workers and teachers to realize that just because you don't have maybe, the most amazing voice, like there's only one person that has a Celine Dion voice, and that's Celine Dion, so cut yourself some slack here and just realize that you leading worship in your classroom is more about navigating those worship times, setting up and introing that moment and helping your kids understand what the time is about and how they can engage and why they should engage. And so if you can equip your teachers to just understand, like, don't feel threatened by your lack of musicality or the fact that you don't feel like you have the best voice, it's like, use the pre-recorded vocal, like take some pressure off there, but realize that you've got to steer the ship where you want it to go. And so that means you've got to talk and share and set up the song and keep encouraging and helping the kids know how they can participate within it. And so that's really something that I think, whether it's just a teacher in a classroom or whether you have a specific team, I do know of many preschool environments where maybe they have a certain team, maybe it's some teenagers or a certain, couple of people that handle the music and those same people, that is their job for the service hour, is they go from room to room to room to room and conduct an individual worship time within each class. And then you've got those other situations where they bring everybody to a bigger, large group type area and they do one big combined thing. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it as long as you're making time for it to happen and you're having leaders lead them in worship.
Mm-hmm. How about elementary? As we get, kids get older, what are some tips and some things that are important to lead elementary kids well?
Yeah, I think, it's all at its core the same stuff. Like the core parts of worship leading are the same, whether I am doing it for an elementary kid or I am doing it for a high schooler or an adult. It's being aware of your audience, being aware of how much they're engaging, and then figuring out when they're not engaged how maybe you expected or wanted them to be. What can you change? What can you say? What can you share to help inspire a different outcome to happen that day. And sometimes it works, and sometimes there's a few random days throughout the year that it just is not great. And there's no rhyme or reason. You're doing their favorite songs and it still isn't working, So just cut yourself some slack and know that next week will be better in those moments in time. But I think, well, let me just say this too, because I still, there's so many people that have preteen ministries or, whatnot, but there still are so many out there that have combined ages of kids in one classroom. So I'll speak towards that here related to elementary, and just my advice is music is definitely one of the opportunities that you have to really connect with your kids well and be intentional in this area, to have songs and music and leaders and whatnot that these kids are attracted to. I feel like music is an area where I can help show kids that Jesus is relevant to their life today, and sometimes in churches, due to song choices that we've made or who we have up there attempting to lead worship, we haven't excelled in this area. And so what happens then when we have made some choices that the kids don't love it, they feel it's a little too childish or kiddish for them or whatnot, I feel like then the message that is being shared with those kids is Jesus is not relevant to their life today. And so I want, through my song choices, through my music, through clothes I wear, through personality of who I have up there leading, et cetera, to make sure that I'm helping show kids that, hey, we're aware of what's going on with the world, and we want to show you Jesus in a relevant way. So I know that was, relevant was a word that we used a whole lot there for a while, but it applies on this because there's a lot of people that are doing some backwards things related to music. And so that starts with sometimes freshening up your playlists. When was the last time you introduced a new song?
Yeah.
And something I've found, honestly, even with my own stuff, and I've been focused on kids exclusively now, this is going into my 12th year. And even just, in these past 12 years that I've been doing stuff, kids change and their personalities have changed. And sometimes a song works incredibly awesome where it's the most popular one. It's the song everybody, wants to hear and wants to sing. And even within that, those songs have seasons, and it's not that that song is no longer a good song or that it's a bad song, but our lives have shifted and changed and moved and whatnot. And so sometimes leaders will be stuck on a certain thing because, like, oh, this has always worked and it worked for the kids 6 years ago. And so I'm going to drive this into the ground. Versus realizing that the kids you have in your ministry now, maybe weren't born 6 years ago, or they were just born, And so there are some shifts and changes, and be okay with the fact that it may be a different group of songs that best connect and best reach this group of kids. And so be willing to make some changes there. But back to what I was trying to say a minute ago of combined ages, is just, I like to say, aim high. I feel like this is an area that you don't want to skip, and you don't want to make it babyish and dumb it down. So in combined age groups, I'm going to target still those oldest couple of grades in the class. That is going to be what I'm going to focus my music on. And, does that mean that the youngest kids in the class may not be able to sing every word of the song? Very possibly. It may take them longer to catch on. It may not be the exact perfect fit for those youngest kids. But the way I look at it, my conscience on the subject is those oldest kids in our ministry, they are about to move on to student ministry, and I don't know what it is with parents of how they make a child go to kids ministry. And then all of a sudden, once a kid's a teenager, they don't have to go to church anymore.
Yeah.
Why that happens, I'm not quite sure. But I don't want anything that I'm doing in children's ministry to contribute to that hardened heart and that feeling of I don't belong here and I don't want to continue and be a part of the ministry that is even happening in middle school or whatnot. So, um, so I think it's important to focus on those oldest kids, focus on their hearts, shaping, meeting their needs. And does that mean, I think you can still occasionally do some songs that are geared best for the younger kids in the room. But I think even if it comes down to having a little powwow with the oldest kids and letting them know and communicating to them, hey, we're going to still do this one song every week that I know you think is a little bit lame. Like you probably think this is a little cheesy or whatnot. Here's why I'm doing it. We have first graders in the room. We have second graders in the room. And like, this is going to help them participate in a way that they can't with these other songs we're doing. And I think just even having that conversation and empowering your oldest kids to realize too, like, you're not crazy. You're not dumb. You're not irrelevant. You're just having to accomplish a lot of different needs all within the same room. So I think that's one way to look at it. I've even shared with people, I'm like, if it looks like you have a Elmo's World, segment to your combined age service where you do a couple of things, a song or a teaching moment or whatnot, that's like a little bit younger, then I think it's okay because it gives those older kids permission to like, not that they have to check out, but they can let their guard down,
Yeah,
and
sure.
understand like, hey, I get to help out with this one. I get to be a leader or have fun or, whatever. But just to help them know, like, you know where they're at and you want to meet their needs in the best way possible is important.
That's good.
And two, I will say too, I've had a shift in my own thoughts about this just the past couple of years with elementary because I suddenly had a first grader and I had a second grader that is my son. And I realized as I was going, a couple summers ago, going to do a VBS event and realized Sparrow's going to be in my large group elementary class, and I think for me too, I had a shift. It's not that his musical tastes are very advanced. What, the music he wants to hear is this other thing. But if he doesn't already know the song, based on his reading level and his ability to catch onto it and jump in, he needs the little praise party songs that I do because of their action oriented, part, because of their simplicity. Like that's where his skill level is, even if he might like this bigger song. And so too, it's just, shifted some things in my mind too, of just like where the line is of what they're capable of doing, mixed with putting that in a package that is sonically pleasing, to their ear.
Yeah. How about preteen? Like that's a big thing right now, not just with music, but in ministry, lots of people are starting separate preteen environments or whatever. So when it comes to worship music, what were some thoughts you have there?
Well, I mean, with preteen, the great part is you're focused on an age group, and you've just eliminated the situations I was talking about a second ago of having the younger kids there. And so you can be really specific. When I was on staff at our church in Oklahoma and overseeing worship for a lot of different ages, our preteen worship was really a blend. You had a few elements of what our younger elementary worship was. We did it with a live band. I'm not saying you have to have a live band, but we used it as a way to recruit and train and get more musicians and worship leaders prepared to help us in future areas with our student ministry as well. So a lot of people bounced around both those places, both with our student ministry and our preteen ministry, and developing their own giftings. But we also did a good mix of songs that our middle school ministry did. And so when you really looked at our set lists and our song choices, it was kind of a hybrid. And I think that's great because with every age group, you need to accomplish what you're doing, to target the age that classroom is, but you also need to be preparing them for what's coming next. And so I'll give you an example of that. So, like so many children's ministries, they love to do motions, choreography, all of that to the songs. And I think there's a time and place for it. I don't necessarily think it's needed for every song from start to finish of every song. I think we can be a little bit more selective in doing it when it makes the most sense. But if your student ministry does zero motions and your elementary ministry only does motions, your preteen ministry needs to definitely start helping those kids understand that there's more than one way to participate in worship. And so you've got to start giving them opportunities of how and teaching them how to participate in worship when it's not a dance choreography from start to finish of every song. Because otherwise, what's going to happen, let's just say as an example, your children's ministry sings the song Happy Day. Your student ministry still sings the song Happy Day. And so you've got someone in your preteen area that graduated up to middle school the first day. They sing this song that they're familiar with and they know, but a completely different action is expected in one classroom than their experience was. That's a great way to embarrass that brand new middle schooler, if they bust into the thing. I'm like, talk about an awkward first day, right? So, I think that's where in preteen ministry, if your elementary worship looks like this, student ministry worship looks like something completely different. Preteen needs to bridge the gap and start helping them understand and be prepared to know how to just stand and sing a song, or how to clap our hands or be excited and, jump and fist pump and whatnot. And so set them up to win, because preteens are so, like, they kind of care about being cool, but not in the way that middle schoolers do. Like, middle school worship was the hardest thing I ever did, hardest age group for sure. Preteens are still so open and hungry. And so it's a wonderful area of ministry for you to really get in there and really teach them and help them understand what worship is, because they're still at this hungry point where they will completely tap in and join in with you really well if you just draw the box, around what you're doing to help know how to. So it's definitely a crucial area where I feel like you can accomplish so much of laying a foundation in them to understand what worship is and why we do it, and really set them up to be awesome worshipers that your student minister will appreciate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The fruit of your labor. So.
Yep. Well, let's talk a little bit about volunteers and kind of, both sides, volunteers who lead, like whether that's on stage or in the room or whatever that is. And then after that, we can talk about all the other volunteers in the room, because that matters too. But if you're a volunteer leading on stage, you've signed up to do this. You already mentioned how it's not as much about your music ability as it is your leadership ability. But what are some other tips you would give to them?
Yeah. And, biggest tips, I would just say, number one, realize that someone believes in you. Okay. Whoever gave you this opportunity and gave you this role and entrusted you with this job to be the worship leader, they believe that you can do it. And so, for those that have the stage fright, or, it's like, what are you worried is going to happen? The kids are not going to throw tomatoes at you and laugh you off stage. Like, your worst fear is really not going to take place. So, take a deep breath and just realize, like, hey, somebody, whether it was a senior pastor, whether it was a children's ministry leader, pastor, someone entrusted you with this role. So let's rise to the occasion. Let's step in there. Let's do it to the best of our ability. That means you've got to spend time preparing every week. It's not sufficient to just pop the song in the car as you're driving to church, thinking you can know it like the back of your hand, unless you live, 2 hours from your church or something, and you're driving a really long way. Like, it's just not going to be enough. So I like to say there's freedom in preparation. And the more time that you invest in knowing your songs, knowing the arrangement of the song, so you know where all the extra little pieces of music are that you can use those pieces of music to say something to the audience, to encourage them to react or engage with each other, or to remind and coach and encourage them to sing a little bit louder, whatever that looks like. Like, you've got to know the song well to know where those moments are that you can use to help steer and point the kids in the way to go. Smiles are important. Wearing color is important. You look happier wearing color, All black is slimming. It worked for Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
We're working with kids, And so having color and bold prints, I'll like an example. A little tiny gingham shirt looks like a solid once you're far enough away, so it's like, that's not a pattern if you're at the front of the room and you've got 100 kids in your class. So, even be intentional about some of that stuff. But, if talking is not natural to you, and I say that because I spent years singing at church and only ever singing the one special song. And when I all of a sudden had to start talking in a mic to a group of people, it was a thing, that I had to work through. So if that's not natural to you, then even typing out, your thoughts of what you would say to greet the kids and intro the song or transition from one song to another, writing some of those things out where you can kind of see it and edit it. Not that we want you to get up there and sound like a robot reading a script, but especially until you build up that muscle to just be someone that can get up there and off the cuff, talk. It makes sense. It will really help you collect your thoughts and help you kind of organize and develop a plan, because that's the thing, you're leading them. It would be like getting in the car for a road trip with no idea of how to get where you're going. You're the person driving the car. And so you need to think through how you're going to get the kids from A to Z ultimately, but week by week, you're always accomplishing that. You may be getting them from A to M,
Sure.
So you've got to have a plan for where you want to take them.
Yeah. How about the volunteers that are in the room? So maybe they're small group leaders, and they're definitely not signed up to be on stage, but what they do matters, right? So what would you say to them?
Yeah, be engaged. Like whatever is happening that is being asked of the kids, you've got to be willing to jump in and do that same thing, because the kids are watching you. I'll give an example too. So I led worship for this traveling preteen event called Super Sharp for years, and they rotated it where different people got to sit in different sections in the front and the back and whatnot from session to session, trying to make it fair. And it would never fail that sometimes in one of the Saturday sessions, we would get to this worship moment, and it's like there would be a group sitting down towards the front that, although we've just asked everyone in the room, hey, would you please stand to your feet? And we're going to do this right now. There would always be a group, and, I get it. They're tired. They probably stayed up too late the night before. They're coming off a sugar high. There's real reasons as to why they're tired. But it was always interesting to me that some of these adults, I would watch them follow the lead of what their kids did. And they would say, suddenly sit back down or stay seated with their kids, instead of them being the leader to say to their kid, it doesn't matter if you're tired right now. They've just asked us to stand up. And in this moment, this is the right thing to do. And it's the right action for us to take. And so leading their kids accordingly. And so your kids, your leaders that are sitting amongst the kids, that are in the aisles, on the side walls of the room, wherever they are, if they are in the line of sight of your kids, they've got to be engaging, because they as well are setting an example. They are showing the kids what's acceptable behavior in that moment and what's not. And if they're checked out, your kids are going to check out too.
How about this? I feel like this is like the $1,000,000 question. How do you get boys to engage in worship, especially older boys? You know, maybe you don't have a separate preteen environment, or even if you do have a preteen environment, that's still a challenge. We know that for sure. So how do you get boys to engage in worship?
Yeah. Well, it's not one specific thing. It's a combination of things. It can be your song choices. It can have to do with your leaders. You know, obviously, anytime you can get some teenage boys or young adult men, you know, to come and be involved in this area, like that's just going to help. You know, you need who you have up there on stage to be somebody that those boys want to be like, or at the bare minimum can respect. You know, not saying that I have, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but I have a good track record of leading boys in worship. It's not that boys want to be just like me, but I'm presenting enough things that they aren't rolling their eyes at to where there's a common respect, you know, like, and they can take that step to engage because of maybe how I'm presenting myself or what I'm sharing. Your song choices make a difference. Who you have up there makes a difference. I think what you're asking them to do, and a question that I've been wrestling with all year related to this too, is just what are you inviting them towards? I think that's a great question for leaders to think about in this, because when you really analyze your songs and how you're doing them and what your leader situation might be, it may be crystal clear to you that you realize what I'm inviting them to do is really not that appealing, you know, for the demographic that I'm supposed to be reaching here. And so make some changes in that area. But related to what you're inviting them to do, a big issue too can be the motions that you're asking them to do. Again, getting back on that, just because I've talked with enough leaders where they think if they don't have motions to a song, they can't do the song, which is hogwash, you know? There's a time and place for it, and it's really good, but I'll give you an example. So years ago, what kind of got me starting to think about this was I had this song I did some motions for, and I could do it with a group of only preteens, and they would engage with the song and do it. I would do the exact same song, exact same thing, and suddenly a wide span of ages of elementary, you know, the combined situation, kindergarten all the way through 5th or 6th grade. And suddenly those oldest kids no longer were engaging with what I was doing. And it made me ask the question of, I don't care if they're willing to do it when it's only them in the room. Why are they not willing to do it when the first grader's there or the second grader's there? And so it changed for me, like what I want to ask them to do. So I do motions that are a lot more simple. It may just be a rock fist for a key word. It may just be an arm waving back and forth for a section of the song. I may do motions in the chorus, but not do them on the verse. Instead of forcing stuff to be there for every single word, you know, where you're miming every word that's happening. I do it when it makes sense. I like to say, what's the most obvious thing that comes to mind when you hear this song, when you hear and sing these words? What are you naturally inclined to do? I think that is the best motion that could be done, because it's what most people are naturally going to be inclined to react to the music to do. And so for some of you that really struggle in this area, I would say rethink the subject of motions a little bit and maybe change what you're presenting and asking those oldest kids to do, because it could very much be that they've just decided, like, I don't want to do that. You know, that's not, even a good question is what you're asking them to do something that a 10-year-old boy would be willing to do? You know, like that's a good filter to put all of it through. And I think even being selective about it, doing it when it makes sense, but also having songs that you don't do it on. and teaching them how to worship in some other ways besides just this textbook children's ministry worship looks like this picture that we've painted more and more in the past decade or two, is a really great place to start. And I think if you make some shift and some changes in those areas, you will see some different results. Of course, mixed with teaching them what worship is about and why we do it. Because kids are the easiest group that you will ever lead in worship, far easier than a middle-aged man. Okay? Just trust me on that. Okay?
Yeah, makes sense
they are the easiest group. So they just need you to draw a box and just explain. Kids are used to being told what to do. And so they naturally will worship. They just need you to help them understand what, why, where, when, how.
Yeah. When you talk about teaching them, that's a good segue, because I want to ask you about Heartbeat and kind of a new curriculum to have to help teach kids about worship, and also about just where leaders can go to get your music. But tell us about Heartbeat first.
Yeah. So the Heartbeat is a 5-lesson curriculum series that I released this past year. And it's something I had in my heart for a number of years, because I talk with leaders, just like those of you that are listening, and they present their issues and their challenges. And I love talking that through and helping you figure out maybe what a next step is. But I just kept wrestling with that. What can I do to help these leaders? Because I knew in some of these conversations I was having that the leader might understand that worship is important, but I kept walking away knowing they don't even understand worship enough themselves to know how to put it into words, to break it down for their kids. And so I wanted to develop this because I think whether you're just starting out, and wanting to make your vision for worship in your children's ministry be a thing and march forward, being intentional in this area, I think it works for that. I think even when you're in one of these challenging spots where worship hasn't been working well, maybe it's because of poor song choices or poor leader choices or no leader at all. Again, you can't just push play on a video and expect that people are going to participate. They're used to watching shows on TV and watching some Netflix, on an iPad. They don't hop up and do a thing while they're watching it. And so that's, again, why you need a leader to do it. And so, even if that's the place that you're in, I think this is a great place for you to just kind of land and hover and plant good seeds and, mess with some roots that have maybe taken with some misunderstanding in this area. So we look at David's life. All the Bible stories are about David. He was given that title, man after God's own heart. And I believe that's because David had learned how to worship, period, no matter what was happening. On his best days, on his worst days, his response was to run to God and to draw close to God. And we know in God's word in multiple places, when we take that step and we run to him and we draw near to him, he will draw near to us. And so that's really what the series is about, just helping your kids understand the heart of worship, what they can learn from looking at David's life. And then I also teach them one of the things that we've gotten such great feedback on from leaders, just talking about how much their kids loved learning these Hebrew words for praise. And we help teach them these words. And there's always a certain action, tone, attitude that goes with each of these different words of praise in Hebrew that just help us better understand how we can engage and participate in worship and why that is. And so kids have responded really well to that segment too. But it's awesome. I've gotten such great testimonials from people using it. So you can go to yancyministries.com/heartbeat. yancyministries.com/heartbeat. You can learn more all about the curriculum. You can even download the first lesson as a sample so you can kind of dig in and see what all it is. There's a lot of video content, a lot of media, social media plan, all of that good stuff is there. So it's really a great thing that I know will help you just break down worship for your kids and help them better understand it. And then I think you asked about my music too. So
Yeah, there's probably a
Yancy
variety
Ministries,
there. Yeah, you can get it at different
yeah,
places, right?
a
Yeah.
few things. Yeah, so yancyministries.com has everything, but specifically for the preteen and elementary worship, I do that with a series called Kidmin Worship. You can go directly just to kidminworship.com for that. Little Praise Party. It's on my site. You can try to go to littlepraiseparty.com. It just kind of redirects you to another page, but that should work as well. And then worshiphousekids.com is a great resource for lots of music. You can download, the different lyric videos and countdowns and stuff that you need. I've released a couple countdowns this year too. So worshiphousekids.com has that. And then our friends with orangekidsmusic.com, they have a lot of my music there as well too. So you can check it out all those places.
Awesome. Last question. What should leaders know about using YouTube in music? Because I see that's come up all the time in Facebook groups. People ask questions or make assumptions or whatever. Yeah. So tell us about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, it does come up. Okay, so the truth of it is we all know that we on things on our computer all the time, we agree to terms and conditions, or we just scroll down and hit that agree button. And we all know we don't read that fine print of what we're agreeing to. And when you dive into the fine print of YouTube, as clearly from these Facebook discussions, most ministry leaders haven't, you'll see and read for yourself that YouTube is it's a personal platform. It's something that is created for you as an individual. The business structure of YouTube is not set up for you to present it to hundreds and at times thousands of people, because it's based on you watching that singular ad to see whatever video. Sure. And so when you look at the fine print, it says it won't be in a commercial place. It's not for group viewing. It's for your personal thing. And so YouTube can be a great, research tool and a great resource for you to maybe go and find out about something. But in most cases, there's a few exceptions, where a certain company is maybe giving you permission right there saying, hey, use this, show this, take this, whatever. But I've experienced so many conversations even where leaders are telling other ministers how to steal a video and extract it from YouTube, which when you do that, number one, you're breaking a 10 commandment. Mic drop then and there. But number two, when you extract it, then the tiny sliver of a stream of income that is within YouTube gets cut off. And so then when you continue to play that video, you've stolen it, and the people that made it are no longer getting millipennies, as I call them, for that stream. So that is very problematic. And so, you need most church resources when you're buying things directly for your church, and you can ask, the different companies that you get things for your church from about this, but they're usually going to provide to you group viewing rights, which means you can use it in your classroom to show to a large group of people. And so that's just really an important thing, because when people don't do things the right way, then it makes it really, really hard to continue to make things.
Sure, definitely. I learned, I don't even remember all the details now, but our worship pastor was telling me a little while back just all the nuances of having a CCLI subscription. But then if you live stream your service, right, think about that and the music, or if a lot of churches do at the movie series and like with the restrictions on that. I mean, there's just so many that again, people we just scroll and hit say yes. We don't pay attention to it.
People all the time, if for you to show a movie at your church and have a movie night, you've got to license that movie, and there's companies out there that will do that where you can go get a license for you to show whatever. Sometimes there's restrictions. I've seen people comment like, you can't advertise the name of the movie.
Yeah.
Like
he was telling me about that too. Like certain ones.
Yeah. And even, another little thing that some people don't realize. So, Spotify, Apple Music are great things because as church leaders, you can create a playlist and share of songs that you're doing in your ministry. Share that with parents, share that with the families of your church so that they can continue to listen to these songs that you're doing in your class this quarter, or however often you want to freshen that up.
Mm-hmm.
But for you to even utilize Spotify and Apple Music in your classroom, again, you need a business account to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So you pushing play, just being signed in off of your personal account, it's just like what I was sharing before. That pay structure is set up off of, you as an individual. At the most, your 4 or 5 family members, if you've got some sort of family or whatnot. But for you to go and play that in a commercial establishment, which your church is a commercial establishment, and you're dealing with 10, 20, 50, 100, 500 kids or more, you need that business account so that more people are compensated for what they're contributing to the ministry that you're doing, because it's a partnership, and you're benefiting from the work that other people are doing as well. And so
totally
keep it fair and upright.
We talked about yancyministries.com. I imagine that's the best place to go to connect with you. But is there any other way that people can connect with you, find your music? We'll link all this in the show notes too to make it easy. But
yeah. So my music is all the places: iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, all those things. Church resources, yancyministries.com and worshiphousekids.com are probably the easiest, most direct things. And then I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's my favorite social media platform. So you can follow me at any of those places with the username of Yancy Not Nancy. So Yancy Not Nancy is my social media handle, and I would love to meet you guys and tag me in your pictures and videos and stories and stuff you do. It's I love, at the weekends that I'm home and just like living normal life, when someone tags me and I get to see my video on a screen in your classroom and see a group of kids that are singing along and participating, like that is my one of my greatest joys and greatest honors, is just to be a small little part of what you guys do in your ministry. So I love seeing that stuff. So keep tagging me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Yancy, thanks for everything you do, for all this that you create, and for the events that you do and all that. People can learn more about that as well. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, Nick.
Well, that was a fun conversation with Yancy. I've been wanting to get her on the podcast for a long time, and so I'm glad we finally did. Here are a few action steps I thought of coming out of that interview. One is to define the win for each age group, like she talked about. So you can sit down and think through. I know there's a lot of things you probably want to accomplish, a lot of ways you would describe what it would look like if it works the way you hope. But what is one win? What's the biggest win for each age group as it comes to leading them in worship? And then another action step, and this is bigger, of course, would be to refresh your music. Something else that she talked about. Is your music the same music you were using 10 years ago? Maybe it's a chance to refresh that. And then the third thing is to check out Heartbeat, the curriculum, for sure. As we talked about that, that's something you can check out, see if that'd be helpful to you. So I'm glad we got Yancy on the podcast. In fact, we're talking with Yancy about doing maybe 1 or 2 courses with us with Ministry Boost about kids worship and just helping church staff lead kids in worship at their church. And so we haven't even talked specifically about what those courses might be, but if that is something you would be interested in, I would love to hear from you. And maybe you can tell me specifically what would be helpful for you if Yancy were to put a course or 2 together. And I'd love to hear that from you. You can always email me with that kind of stuff, ideas, podcast guest ideas, any of that at nick@nickblevins.com. Don't forget to get all the links and notes and show notes and all that at nickblevins.com/episode 168. But that's it for this week. Hope that was helpful. We'll be back next week interviewing my friend Robert Purvey about youth ministry. So you'll want to check that out. Until then, hope you have a great week, and I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.